So recently I switched over to Wayland from X11, and honestly it's been a really awesome experience. Now if you don't know what Wayland is, it's essentially a replacement for the X11 windowing system, which is really old. It's multiple decades old at this point, and it's accrued quite a lot of technical debt. Now I've had a lot of issues with X11 over my Linux journey, things like the screen tearing and external monitors being buggy and applications crashing whenever I'm moving them between monitors and stuff like that. But I've never really given Wayland a shot because I sort of had this perspective that Wayland was only really useful if you wanted to use some fancy window manager like Hyperland, where you have all these cool animations and things like that. And personally, I don't really care about that. I kind of just want my windows to pop up and snap in place and have no animations. So I never really gave it a shot. But I'm here today to tell you that Wayland is absolutely worth it, even if you're a person like me that doesn't really care about the animations and you just want like a quick and precise desktop experience. So today I'm going to be talking about my experience with Wayland and what I am doing personally and how this compares and contrasts to my X11 setup. So just for some background, I used the i3 window manager with XFCE services before switching over to Wayland, and I made a video on that linked in the description. And basically whenever I moved over to Wayland, I wanted essentially the exact same experience. I did not want to give up my workflow whatsoever. And so a lot of the comments in my previous video were saying to check out Sway, which the big thing about Sway is essentially the i3 window manager, but for Wayland. You can basically just drop in an i3 configuration file into Sway and it will work. Now that is with the caveat that certain things that run on X11 will not work on Wayland, so you do need to get their Wayland alternatives, but a lot of that is either put in the comments of the default Sway configuration file, or those alternatives are listed in the Arch Wiki. So this is my Sway setup currently running right now, and as you can see, it's pretty indistinguishable from an i3 setup. I can move between my panes, I can resize my panes, I can swap them around, I can go into tabbed mode and go out of it, and I can switch between workspaces very, very quickly. So my workflow did not change whatsoever moving over to Sway. Now let's go ahead and take a look at that configuration file, because I said that you can just drop in an i3 configuration file, but you do have to make some changes just to adapt it to the Wayland system. So this is my Sway configuration file. The entire configuration is in one file here, and I'm just going to briefly go over like the different sections inside of this configuration. So I set my modifier key and then set up, down, left, and right, and then I set my terminal and my browser here. So all of this is exactly the same as i3. Where it does deviate is setting up monitors. So I have two monitors. I have my built-in display and I have my external monitor, and the way that you configure those inside of Sway is you use this output here, which just specifies, the output and then the resolution and then the actual position of it here. So, and then some just additional settings. So this is how you set a wallpaper, and then you can allow tearing and disable max render time and stuff like that. That's just some personal settings that I've found that work pretty well. Now the cool thing about this is that all of this comes with Sway. So I didn't have to download PCOM or download or use xrandr or stuff like that. It's all just built in, and that's really, really cool because it minimizes the amount that I have to go hunting for Wayland alternatives for everything. These are just some things that were included in the default configuration file here. So stuff with Sway idle and the touchpad and things like that. And here we have a couple different modifications. So I run my terminal with mod enter and then mod shift enter if I want hardware acceleration. And then I run my browser with mod shift F. And then we have a couple other things here. So like I have a quick shortcut for screenshotting. And then I have my application launchers here, which I use Rofi. Now Rofi out of the box does not support Wayland, but there is a fork that works with Wayland, and there's also a thing called Wofi, which is just a port of Rofi to Wayland, and both of them support just the regular Rofi configuration file. So I did not do any changes to my configuration file, and if we look at it, this is my Rofi, so it looks just like regular Rofi. So it was basically just a drop-in replacement for me. And you'll see that all of the syntax for like key maps and stuff is exactly the same. So I just copied a lot of this over from my i3 configuration. Same thing with the workspaces. It's all the same stuff there. So where my configuration does deviate the most from my i3 setup is my status bar. One thing that I wanted to take advantage of that I didn't take advantage of in i3 is that I can get rid of the title bar in Sway. Which gives me just some more real estate. So whenever I'm like actually doing stuff here, as you can see, I don't have title bars So I have just like a little bit of extra real estate, and I display the title at the bottom of the screen here. So it's like that. And that is a feature that is built into Waybar. So I installed Waybar there, and then I made a little Waybar configuration here with all the things that I want to display. And then I made some CSS for it just to make it look basically like i3 bar, which is what I normally use. And that was relatively easy to do. It was just this much CSS, so it wasn't too crazy there. And there's some decent documentation on Waybar that I will link in the description as well. And yeah, I put gaps on my workspace number 5. That's the one that I'm on now, just so it looks like kind of pretty. It can look pretty cool. Like here I have my graph. I can just show my graph. I can do Astro Terminal, and boom, this is my setup here. So I said I don't like flashy things, but you know, sometimes it can be pretty cool to have these cool little applications and sort of like take a screenshot and show off my setup. But anyways, Sway can look pretty cool, even if it doesn't have all of those fancy animations. And on that note, while I did say that Sway doesn't have all of those like cool animations and effects and stuff like that, there is another project called Sway FX, which basically just adds all of those cool Hyperland style effects to Sway. So if you're into that kind of thing, then you can just use this, and you could probably just port over your Sway configuration file and just add those extra cool effect commands, and it would be a pretty cool, neat looking setup. I mentioned earlier that some of the X11 specific things in your i3 setup or any similar X11 setup will not work on Wayland, and so you have to get alternatives, and a lot of those are listed on the Arch wiki, which even if you don't use Arch, it's still a really good resource for finding these alternatives. So for example, the default application launcher is W menu instead of D menu because D menu is X11 based, but I use Wofi because I just prefer the default experience of Rofi. And in addition to getting these additional tools, there are some things that Sway itself provides that make the experience a lot better. And for example, there's like Sway Idle and Sway BG and Sway Lock for adding like lock screens and idle things and the background and stuff like that to your Sway setup, which it will provide automatically, but if you don't have those commands, it just simply won't do anything with it. So that's some pretty cool stuff, and so I do recommend it. I think I have all 3 of these actually installed, so there you go. And if you want to know some of the other utilities that I'm using here, I use Slurp for screenshots, and I use Grim for processing them and saving them into files and stuff like that. And I use WL Color Picker for picking a color, so I can do this, and I can just, you know, click somewhere on my screen, and then I have the color in hex code format. So pretty cool stuff there. And that's basically all that I've really added as far as like external dependencies go. Just every once in a while I find some little utility and I look it up and I say like Wayland and then utility and then Arch, and then every single time there has been some sort of option for me. So I've never found that Wayland has limited my ability to find the tools that I need for the job. Now, one concern that I did have with Wayland was that when I use it, I will not be able to run anything that uses X11, and that is just blatantly false. So far, I haven't had any issues with things that only support X11, including my own projects. Like, I have like a very simple project here that only supports X11 because it uses the so-called app windowing library, which only supports X11, but it works perfectly fine, and I don't notice any sort of performance dip or anything whatsoever, although supposedly there is a small performance dip. And this has basically been my experience with every single X11 program that I've tried on Wayland. They all just work out of the box, and they work just as seamlessly, if not more seamlessly than on X11, because everything just feels so smooth on Wayland. Now, if you want to install Wayland, it's really, really easy to install, especially if you're on Arch Linux. I don't know about the other Linux distros, but Wayland on Arch is very, very simple to install. All you need to do is install Wayland itself here, and then you also probably want to install X-Wayland, which allows you to run X11 applications. So you install Wayland and you install X-Wayland here. Now, if you're on NVIDIA, I've heard that it can be more difficult to set up, and you might have to switch over to open source drivers like Novia, which I think is on Arch Linux like this. So you might have to switch over to Novia. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's the open source NVIDIA drivers. I didn't do that. I just wanted to see like, hey, will it work with what I currently have? And so I installed Wayland, I installed X-Wayland, and I installed Sway. and then I boot it into Sway and I use the tag unsupported GPU. So you do Sway unsupported GPU like this, and it will use Sway with the proprietary NVIDIA drivers, and I haven't had any issues. So maybe I just got really, really lucky, but it works perfectly fine for me. So that's really awesome for me, at least. So my general takeaways after switching to Wayland are that it is absolutely worth it because it just makes everything so much smoother. It has removed basically all of the bugs I had with application crashing and screen tearing and compositor issues and wallpaper issues and things like that. And it hasn't been any sort of detriment to my workflow because of the existence of the Sway window manager. So if you were thinking about switching, I would say give it a shot. It's actually reduced the amount of time that I have to spend messing with my system. After setting up Sway and properly, configuring my setup, I don't spend basically any time tinkering with my setup anymore. It's in such a stable state right now. Whereas on X11, I would always have some sort of issue that would pop up at the worst moment, and I would just have to sit there and try to debug it for hours on end. Even though Wayland is still a little unstable and very fast moving, in my experience on the user side, it has been very stable and reliable for me. So with that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this useful and informative. By the way, all the configuration files for my Sway setup and my Waybar setup are going to be linked in the description. So feel free to check those out if you want just a drop-in solution. With that being said, that about concludes the video. Thank you very much for watching. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe. If you like this type of content, stuff about Linux and compositors and things like that, let me know in the comments so I know to continue making videos like this. And then also consider supporting me on Patreon so I can continue making videos like this. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good day. See ya.